Today we're going to go through a workflow audit. I've completed this workflow audit for a software development company. They have a team of developers and they wanted me to review it to see what can be improved. So I've made a anonymized version of their workspace and just kept the themes of what I've seen in a few of these audits. So anything that I see across the teams that keeps coming up. One of them is we have different spaces for different departments, which is good, especially if the workflow is different, and a layer permissions onto it. So you don't want one department like HR or sales to be viewed by another department like support. But once you are within the department, this particular team separated their functions into different lists. The symptom that they were reporting is that people were not clear on what they needed to do. There was no way for one person who may be working on different areas to see all of their work in one central place. And also the management were not clear on projects that would span across these different departments. Now we could go up a level and create a view or a dashboard that showed the information, but for ease of use and for just cleaning up, then we thought that this structure would need to be addressed. So with the symptom of not being clear, not knowing where the actual release is, we knew that that was a symptom that needed to be addressed. So this type of structure, they found it difficult for reporting. They found it difficult for scaling, though they could scale. You just add a new list per project. What was happening is they wouldn't necessarily archive or close down the list when the work was done. So irrelevant lists and tasks not being closed appropriately. That's one thing that I was looking at in that audit. The next thing that I observed is that they had many layered tasks. So they would have a parent task, and then they would have a subtask, and then they would have another subtask. And the symptom was that the team needed to bury down to see what they needed to work on. Also, when it came to reporting, there was no simple way to select everything and tie them to a particular group or client or filter out. And so it was causing issues with reporting. With so many tasks, not the parent and the first subtask was not always well documented, and the structure was not consistent. So unclear structures and rules. So that was the next thing that we looked at. The recommendation would be to set up a very clear structure that every task can have one child task. And if something needs to be broken down further, that then it would be a checklist item. So we have parent task, child task, and checklist item. The next item on the list is statuses and workflows. Now, the statuses were not necessarily very clear, and they meant different things to different team members. So that then moved on to an unclear workflow, and too many of those statuses seem to be overlapping in meaning. So that's another item to address. Um, the recommendation for this would be to clarify what the statuses mean, make them clear, and bring them down. So if something is not moving forward, but you've started it, rather than keeping it in one status in progress for 5 days, we would add another status that says blocked, for example. The next item on the list, the audit list, is data consistency. Now, we want to look, when we're looking in the workspace, we're wanting to validate the custom fields that are being used and that the data is being consistent and being captured consistently so that when it comes to reporting, those reports become meaningful. This particular team was using subtasks where a custom field would have been more appropriate and descriptive, and then we'd be able to pull out the reporting based on those custom fields. And this one also had inconsistent use of subtasks versus checklists, and inconsistent definition of done, as well as adding notes and moving data through the workflow consistently. Next on the list was reviewing the views, dashboards, and reporting. Now, this particular client had a pain point of not having the reporting built in, but when we looked into the specific projects, we could see that user-specific views were shared across teams, which would clutter the entire team's view and not necessarily show data that is relevant or meaningful to the rest of the team for one person. So the recommendation for that would be to have more consistent role-based views that a user could then take and customize and make private to them if needed, or make available to a group if more appropriate. And because the teams were seeing views that were not necessarily relevant, they were just creating their own search every time they wanted to see information. So that made it difficult for them to use. Next on the list is permissions. So looking at privacy, how spaces, folders, lists are being shared, what users do and do not need to see, and the overall permission structure. And so for this project, we could see that there were sensitive documents that were being shared in the space where the entire team could access, and teams have access to all spaces rather than the spaces that they need. And so the recommendation there would be to lock down some of the spaces so that it would be role based, team based, and keep sensitive information locked away. Same thing with views. Sometimes there were specific views that would need to be locked so that no one could actually alter them, and then other views that could be hidden away completely. Next is automations. Now, this particular team had a real use case for automations, especially when a task is moving from one team to the other. And so no automations were implemented, even though there were clear use cases. So, based on the workflows that we would improve on, we would then make the recommendations to automate some of it, at least for consistency and also for ease of use. Next is looking at adoption. And so looking at this particular team had unassigned tasks in active lists, had tasks that would sit in progress for weeks without any clear step or being flagged as a blocker, no ownership rules, and completed or irrelevant tasks that remain open. So, additional noise within the system. And so, the recommendation is to set clear ownership rules and then automate those where possible. Tasks that sit in progress for weeks without a clear blocker or next step, um, those should be surfaced for the project manager or product owner or management to review and assist with. And then unassigned tasks, yeah, also surface those information. And so once we do a workflow audit, we can see everything that would need to be improved and everything that would need to be addressed so that what we're doing is we're building in the signals so that our super agent can come in and monitor the actual project health.